Thank you, Shepard. Well, Baji or bust, as the battle rages over Iraq's largest oil refinery as we speak, could you end up paying more at the pump? Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto. And gas prices up again today. They're now averaging $3.67 a gallon. Militants attacking Iraq's Baji refinery, and there are conflicting reports over who exactly has the upper hand. Iraq's important because it ranks fifth when it comes to the world's largest oil reserves. And the theory is it goes, game over. In fact, Chris Martinson says it goes, we're looking at double oil prices from where they are today, from $106, maybe as much as $200. He's the co-founder of peakprosperity.com. Why do you say that high? Why?
Well, world oil supplies are very tight right now, Neil. We've got the International Energy Agency just a month ago was calling on Saudi Arabia to hit record production territory all on its own. There's less than 50 days supply above ground in industrialized stockpiles at this point in time. So the world oil supply is actually very tight. And I know in the United States we've got a lot of production and people are focusing on that, but oil is a global commodity, very tight. So Iraq's supplying about 3 million barrels per day into the kitty that gets exported. If any of that goes away, we start to see higher prices. If all of it goes away, we're going to hit that $200 mark.
All right, now we've been seeing this inexorable march on Baghdad on the part of insurgents, but you seem to be looking more closely at those refineries. Why?
Well, the refineries are really critical for the Iraqi people. The Baji refinery, if that goes down, it's down at this point in time, but I mean, if it gets wrecked and takes a long time to come back, the people of Iraq are going to suffer without the fuel they need to have electricity. The electricity is required to run, guess what? The oil installations and other things that are going to provide that oil. We're looking at ExxonMobil just did a mass evacuation of all of its people out of its operations in Iraq. So best case scenario, the best case I can come up with is the ISIS rebels get halted where they are. There's no further damage. They don't make any more gains. Things begin to stabilize. But even under that scenario, Neil, we don't see additional oil production coming out of Iraq, something that the world was counting on.
Yeah, and it's important to point out, and guys like you always remind me that even though we don't get direct Iraqi oil, it is important to Europe, and it's one of the reasons why their oil, quoted as Brent North Sea crude, has been rocketing even more than our oil has, because they feel particularly vulnerable, don't they?
Well, they do, and that oil, the world oil price is $114 a barrel today. I think even under the best case scenarios where ISIS rebels are just halted and things begin to stabilize, that drifts to 120 by year end. But if we lose even 1 million barrels a day of that Iraqi production, I see 150, our old high. If we lose all of it, we go to 200. And of course, there's an even more catastrophic scenario sitting here, which is what happens if this turns into a regional conflict. It becomes Sunni versus Shiite. We basically then say it's Saudi Arabia against Iran. They settle the old grudges. If either of those two get into a squabbling match over this particular situation, we could see a lot higher oil. I'd hate to even pick a number, 300, 400, who knows?
Yeah, the price of oil would be the least of our concerns at that point, you know? Chris, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Well, for today at least, oil prices kind of held stable. So far, we have yet to see any major disruptions from all this. Fears of that, though, and that's something that General James Conway watches very closely, because it's the fear of those disruptions that you have to worry about. And General, the fears are playing out, aren't they?
They are, Neil, and in some cases rightly so. As your previous guest just noted, the world supply is pretty tenuous at this point. We've got disruptions in Nigeria, Sudan, the pipeline is down coming out of Kurdistan. You've got the Russian-Ukrainian thing, Venezuela. All of that contributes to what is a razor-thin margin. The Saudis are able to produce about 3 million barrels a day in terms of a world reserve, but that's pretty thin. Now, that said, I don't believe that we've seen the price spike that we may have anticipated based upon the Iraqi crisis. And I think that's because analysts are saying that they're not confident that the ISIS is going to be able to get into those southern oil fields of Iraq, where about 90% of their daily production goes through the port of Basra.
If they're wrong, General?
If they're wrong, then your previous guest again, I think, is on the mark. I'd hate to pick a figure.
You know, General, I am wondering, though, that when we look at this and the volatility in the region, there are a lot of risks this could just get out of control. And you're quite right to say oil trades on on the fears of that, and it starts rocketing when things seem stable, that's less likely. And this prevailing view now, you just echoed that they can avoid just disaster, that things stabilize. But this has the potential of just redrawing maps in the whole region and changing the game well beyond just the short term.
I think it goes beyond potential, Neil. I honestly think that the Iraq that we knew from 2003 through 2011 is probably gone forever.
Is that right?
I think the Kurds will wind up with an autonomous zone with no association with Iraq. I honestly think that the Sunnis have been so terribly disappointed in the Maliki regime that I don't see them coming back unless there's a distinct change in leadership and a distinct change in attitude. So I think personally that you could see the polarization, the balkanization, if you would, of Iraq. And I think at this point it's more likely than not.
General, in the meantime, we have F-18s surveying the area, sort of trying to get a sense of what's going on. We have apparently ruled out troops, and for the time being, besides those 275 that are going to police Baghdad, even when it comes to an air campaign, nothing yet. What do you make of our response? How do you gauge what we're thinking?
Neil, we need to act in the region based on our national interest, core national interest, and I think probably there's three of them. One is that we ensure that there's a stability in the region, and that means an Iran with no nuclear weapons. Secondly, I think we need to ensure that there is no ungoverned spaces. These are the types of things that attract terrorists and allow them to train, plan, and ultimately strike outside that region. And the third thing is that we've got to ensure that the oil continues to flow. That's as simply as I can say it. It is a vital resource to the entire world, and economies worldwide can suffer if, in fact, the oil in Iraq doesn't continue to flow. My personal view is that, frankly, I wouldn't do a thing at this point to cause the Maliki government to survive. I think, again, he's a complete failure. I suggest we might look on downrange and say, okay, what happens next? If the ISIS is stopped, and I substantially think that they have hit their culmination point, that they're not going to get south, they're not going to take Baghdad, the next thing they'll be looking at is consolidating their gains. And this can only happen in the Middle East, but that brings them in direct conflict with the people that have been supporting them to a degree. And those are the Sunni tribesmen and the rest of the Anbar and the northern provinces. So I could see a situation in the next few weeks where we're actually trying to support our old allies in conflict against the ISIL.
And going into bed with Iran. I mean, it's so many possibilities. It just boggles the mind. But, General, I appreciate your taking the time.
Sure. Have a great day.